Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Velodyne Lidar Live, where we talk to experts from every area of the mobility industry, discussing the latest advancements in autonomous technology and all the ways it's transforming our lives and our communities in real time. I'm Pamela Gauchi, your host for the next 45 minutes or so, and joining me is my co-host, Mary, who's running slides in the background. And today we have two guests joining us from ThorDrive and from Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport, also known as CVG. We'll be talking about how autonomous technology is being used specifically within the aviation industry. But first, let's take a quick look at our agenda so you know what to expect today. We'll start off with a very brief overview on Velodyne Lidar and some of the ways our sensors can be used within the aviation industry. And then we'll move right into our interview with Eddie and Brian for about 35 minutes. And I'll save the last few minutes for audience Q&A. So be sure to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions anytime during the episode. As always, we are recording today's episode, which will be available to watch on Velodyne Lidar's YouTube channel. So let's get started. Here you see a snapshot of some of the diverse applications and industries utilizing Velodyne's LiDAR technology. And today we'll be talking about how that technology can be used specifically within the aviation industry and at airports. And airports are pretty unique in that they really span across all four of these applications. And that's because an airport in many ways is just like a small city. It's built upon a tremendous infrastructure and it has a lot of moving parts. And in this video clip, you're seeing an example of how AV technology can move goods, specifically baggage, on the ground at CVG Airport. Of course, airports also require the movement of people, both indoors and outdoors. And because of this continuous movement of goods and people, every airport also has its own unique traffic patterns. And all of this different movement creates the need for security as well. So you can really see where there would be a tremendous opportunity for autonomous technology to increase both safety and efficiency at any airport. And here you see a photo of the autonomous baggage tractor from the video clip we just watched. We'll be learning a lot more about that autonomous tractor during our conversation with Eddie and Brian. And in this picture, you also see how Velodyne's UltraPuck sensor is integrated into the vehicle. The high density, long range image generated by the UltraPuck makes it an industry favorite for robotics, mapping, security, and autonomous navigation. And we're going to touch on a number of those different uses during this webinar. So now I'd like to introduce Edward Shelton, Vice President of Business Development at ThorDrive, and Brian Cobb, Chief Innovation Officer at CVG Airport. Hi, Eddie. Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Great to have you guys here today. Thanks so much for spending your morning with us. And I'm just going to dive right in. Eddie, ThorDrive actually started as an AI lab at Seoul National University in Korea. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So ThorDrive was officially incorporated in 2016, but we really started the incubation process in 2006 when our founder, Professor So, started the Robotics and AI lab at Seoul National University. So from there, from 2006 to 2009 was the early incubation. And then from there, the team really started to focus on autonomous for automotive, robo-taxis and things, because there was, that was kind of the next big thing. Our first robo-taxi started in 2016, also the same year that we were incorporated. And then in 2018, we ended up expanding first to Silicon Valley, and then eventually here to Cincinnati, Ohio, where we are now.
Great. And so can you tell us about the company today and also about that transition into the US, where you have your headquarters?
Sure. So we initially got into Silicon Valley and we celebrated some early successes with some last mile delivery projects, which we've done both in Korea and in the US. And then really due to market conditions and just how the autonomous industry was changing, the team found it necessary to really pivot into something where potentially there was less competition, but certainly a shorter path to commercialization. And then it really wasn't long after that when the team met the CVG innovation team and Mr. Cobb in particular.
Great. So I definitely want to talk about the partnership between ThorDrive and CVG Airport. But first, Brian, can you give us a sense of the size and the span of CVG, which you've described to me as a quote unquote 7,700 acre campus as a living laboratory?
Sure. First of all, I just got to mention I'm impressed that Eddie called me Mr. Cobb. That's the first.
Only for the webinars.
Okay, so that's it. Pamela, congrats to you. The way you framed it up for the audience is spot on. So it's a city within a city, 7,700 acres, massive campus, over 80 different tenants just inside the fence line. That doesn't include other supportive industries that are just outside the fence line that we also impact. So when you continue to just drill down into the environment, we have our own police and fire divisions, we have our own facilities personnel and our ground maintenance personnel. So again, just like a city infrastructure. In our example or environment, we have a tremendous CEO that's essentially like our mayor, well connected into the community, given our location. We're bridging the gap between Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana on the other side. So we're in a really unique position to demonstrate. I've heard a lot in my career profession over the last 5 years about smart cities. Frankly, got exhausted about those conversations because I just heard a lot of talk. There just wasn't a whole lot of action. It was time for us on the innovation spectrum to use our campus as a massive laboratory with those tenant individuals and companies like ThorDrive to really stop talking about smart cities and start developing a smart city, using an airport as a perfect example.
Now, I do want to talk about how you came together and about the partnership itself. Can you tell us, Brian, how many people are going through that airport, through the day?
Sure. So just from scale perspective, at one point in our history, we were at 22 million passengers. So that was when we were a major connection hub for one of the major airlines, the legacy airlines. That circumstance has since changed because of post-recession and airline mergers and acquisitions. And now we're on the opposite side. The interesting flavor there is, and very little known, is that actually we are a hub airport to DHL, which is the largest cargo industry transporter in the world. And its second largest hub is right here in Cincinnati at CVG. So about the better part of 80 to 85% of the packages that come into the US are actually transiting through our facility and then being delivered to domestic locations. Because of our infrastructure and the position of where we're at in the middle of the country to some degree, that actually encouraged another company, fledgling airline, Amazon Prime Air, that really they came out of nowhere, started rapidly, and have decided that CVG will be their first global air hub. So they're in the process, out of that 7,700 acres, they're in the process of developing upwards of 1,200 of those 7,700 acres, massive facility. So again, when we talk about that infrastructure, we know that our tenant base is really going to need support. That got right back into the ThorDrive environment. And prior to COVID, we were already seeing shortfalls in labor. We were concerned about our tenant base. How are we going to bridge the gap? And very much we were committed to robotics. We had trialed the purpose-built vehicles that many of us have seen in the magazines and online that are kind of look like toaster ovens. We trialed them and just did not work out. So they weren't ready for show, frankly, 15 miles an hour, limited mapping capability. So we went back out to really the industry, found ThorDrive in Palo Alto. I flew out, met the team, and they proceeded to drive me around Palo Alto, roundabouts, passing vehicles, tight, narrow side streets. Got out of that vehicle, and I knew absolutely this was the group to start working with. They nailed it, absolutely. 45 miles an hour, integrated into traffic, a complex environment, just like an airport. So that's where our relationship started, and it has just been nonstop since.
Great. And so, Eddie, can you tell us a little bit about the partnership and what that means to ThorDrive? Why is it a good fit?
Oh, it's a great fit to have the support of industry experts like Brian and his team. To be able to have the access that we have is really, I'd say, pretty much unprecedented. We've been for over 14 months now continuously testing in this environment, which in some cases, is less chaotic than urban driving, but in lots of cases, a very safety critical environment. So your software has to be well developed. And we've been able over that time to develop the ability and capability to recognize aircraft, other vehicles that are out there, even the wing walkers that are blocking the path for safety when a plane is backing out. So over that time, we've been able to develop that, and that's been a huge benefit to us, and probably something that we're probably the only company in North America, most likely, and possibly globally, that's had this opportunity. And then to have this team really as advisors, Brian once said, ThorDrive teaches us about autonomy, and we teach them about aviation. And to have that group of advisors say, kind of give you, future advice on this is important to this industry. These are the capabilities that you really need to have. This is kind of the things that you adapt from, urban driving, where we started, into aviation and into the plane side environment. And it's even gone further than that. The aviation team at CVG is well recognized and aggressively pursuing and implementing new technology. So their brand has been a great benefit to us as well. The co-marketing that we've done has really been great for us. So there's so many different points, as advisors, as an R&D center, as a partner in marketing. There's so many different points where this has just been really critical to get us to really on the cusp of, and we're quickly going down the path of commercialization by this year.
Awesome. And so how is ThorDrive, this is for either one of you, how is ThorDrive technology powered by Velodyne sensors being used today at CVG? Can you tell us some of the use cases?
Eddie, you go first.
Sure. Excuse me. So it's obviously critical in our recognition of the environment around us. So when it comes to planes landing, being able to detect which direction they're going and where they're turning, it's very, very critical, and especially to us, because one of the biggest values of autonomy in aviation really is safety, and being able to reduce the high cost of safety. Ground accidents is about $4 billion a year globally. So using autonomy as a tool to reduce that human error, operator error, is really a big part of our goal. And without the LiDAR, of course, we use a suite of sensors, but without the LiDAR, we can't tell how close, we really can't reliably tell really how close things are to us, and then be able to clear a path around if necessary, or really just be able to plan what our technology is going to do next.
And Pam, just to piggyback off of Eddie's comments, you kind of mentioned it before. It's, what is the product? What is the use case? And we're very much about the use cases. Anyone that does a little bit of studying about us, you'll find a tremendous amount of use case information out there from our partners. Particularly, I would say we're a little bit different than most organizations that are in the innovation space. And why that is that we don't necessarily approach a problem statement. We usually meet companies like ThorDrive that bring partners like Velodyne to the table. We start learning about the product and trying to determine, is there a space for it in aviation? And again, selfishly, it is not just for CVG. It's very much about the entire aviation industry, be it an airline, airport, or other ancillary services. So from that perspective, we're very keenly aware of, we are not the SMEs in a lot of this product space. We try to find the best talent that's out there that completely understands this technology and educates us. And again, like Eddie said, we'll educate on the aviation sector. And to that degree, again, then we kind of pivot into good, better, best. Good is absolutely kind of filling a stopgap right now. If we were to see an employment gap, which again, we saw pre-COVID, this is a perfect opportunity to take an individual that would just mundanely be driving between point A and point B and really put them where it's more critical. So in the bag room and making sure that all the bags make the flight, or in front of the customer to make sure that the customer is actually getting customer services and not just, no customer or no agent available. And then it's an iterative step from there, the safety implications. So we have concerns about foreign object damage, and that is FOD in our industry, and that's product or bits and pieces that are on the runway. So not uncommon that as an aircraft takes off or perhaps heavy winds, it blows stuff onto the runway. That becomes a hazard to us. So very much with a LiDAR capability, we can start really getting into minute detail that the human eye can absolutely not see. So it just continues to build use case upon use case upon use case for us.
Can you talk a little bit specifically about that, the autonomous baggage tractor, and what kinds of benefits we can see from, or you can see from something like that? What are some of the challenges to the way it's those are handled today versus doing this with an autonomous baggage tractor?
Sure, and I have to start really with the variable between ThorDrive and the purpose-built vehicles. ThorDrive is really struck upon a chord that resonates exceptionally well in not just aviation industry, but for any financial organization or an organization that has a finance department. And that's simply through retrofitting existing vehicle platforms. So if you're thinking about an airport and airlines, are we in a position, especially now, again, another financial crunch because of COVID, are we in a position to replace our entire fleet? Absolutely not. But could we theoretically start taking parts of our fleet and retrofitting them for autonomous capabilities? The beauty there is that ThorDrive allows for flipping into manual mode that I can drive the tug, or I flip it into autonomous mode and I have autonomous capability. So the flexibility from that alone is financially really beneficial and easier entry, I should say, into the marketplace. That's point one. Part two is then we get into really kind of the damage incidents that are, we certainly hope don't happen, but unfortunately they do, to billions of dollars every year because of that. Now, what was intriguing is that when we started deploying our autonomous vehicle with ThorDrive, what did we immediately see? We saw a vehicle that obeyed every law that we have as far as the speed limit, the stop signs, the yields, etc., more so than what a human driver typically would do. In fact, the human drivers were getting angry because it wasn't moving fast enough. And for the record, it was moving at the speed limit that we set. So again, it's like immediately kind of lowering the risk of an errant driver. And then the other element is the vehicles that are in our place today, imagine like it's kind of a rental car, and the old term, it's a rental. So individuals don't take personal pride necessarily in their vehicle or with the vehicle that they're driving today because they don't know it. Whereas an autonomous vehicle, absolutely, you're starting to see a honeymoon period on the maintenance side of the house because it doesn't go through use and abuse from 5 different individuals a day or more. So there just continues to be a financial story that's unwinding, and especially with products like Velodyne that as the technology improves, the cost of entry comes down, and of course the use case applications continue to expand. So it becomes very attractive to multiple markets.
And Brian, as Eddie had mentioned, you and your team are really, you've really worked aggressively to identify technology that you think can increase cost savings, improve efficiency, and improve customer experience. So can you talk about some of the other ways you're exploring the use of this technology for the future? What other ways are you looking to use it possibly for your operations at the airport?
Sure. Another one that, less talky, more doey. We constantly hear the conversation about digital twin this and digital twin that. As one might imagine, and if you've been around mid-size or large-size airports, there's typically quite a bit of construction that's going on. So one of the approaches that we went to Eddie and his team about were, well, gee, because the vehicle is constantly adding to the map that it's already developed in a 3D environment, is that not the basis for a digital twin on the exterior of our building? And oh, by the way, we're also using another robotic product. It's a cleaning product inside the building that is also using LiDAR-based technology. So it's creating the same 3D environment as what ThorDrive has done outside. You put those two together and you definitely have the baseline of a digital twin inside and outside your facilities. So immediately for us, the implications are, okay, if we go into construction, what are the implications? And we start designing in that virtual world, as opposed to looking at CAD models or Revit models and trying to determine if we move this and we change that, and how many change orders result because we're just looking at the traditional set. as opposed to actually moving things around in a virtual environment and lowering our cost again, because of the capability that a digital twin brings. And that's not too terribly far-fetched. Immediately, we asked ThorDrive, how quickly can you get into the mapping environment? Because there are a tremendous amount of use cases that we would very much like to tap into because of the mapping capability brought to it because of the Velodyne's UltraPod.
Great. And so we're talking about partnerships. And ThorDrive recently announced a strategic alliance with Woolard International. Can you talk about that alliance and about your recently released proof of concept for that autonomous ground support tractor?
Certainly, certainly. So as a result of the collaboration and the co-development that we've done with CVG after about 10 months, we released our proof of concept in January of this year. So this is, pretty much our 90% of the way complete proof of concept, and that last 5 to 10% is what's taking place right now. So we have that first one that we continuously run even today, gathering more data, and then we're continually building our fleet as well. So as most people know, even though passenger volumes are way down in aviation, cargo volumes are way up. So we have a much bigger tractor coming that's more cargo focused that we'll have at the end of probably at the end of this quarter, and then later this year there's potential for an electric version. And because, like Brian referenced earlier, we are powertrain and platform agnostic, so our capabilities to retrofit go pretty far, which allows us to go really transfer our technology onto cargo tractors, and then from here it really isn't much of a stretch to go from this into pulling cargo and baggage to pulling products and raw materials. So industrial is certainly a future space for us as well.
And so Pam, if I can lean into that just a little bit more. So it's important to remember that when I saw ThorDrive, it was in a passenger vehicle, a retrofitted passenger vehicle. So definitely our interest was to, or is to, transport passengers, but our strategy really has been, let's focus on the baggage piece, movement of cargo, first of all. And oh, by the way, if you're a passenger traveling through CVG, chances are good you're going to see an autonomous bag tug driving around the facility. Now, the intent for that is really to start socializing that autonomous vehicles are certainly here, and the technology that allows autonomy is certainly here. So don't be surprised when you start transiting through CVG if we actually put you in an autonomous vehicle that can transit from our offsite parking lots into the airport proper. So plenty of implications there. And of course, that's where we've pulled in our state level transportation executives, helping them understand this is what autonomy looks like, and also the mass transit environment. Obviously, we have our mass transit bus authority that travels into the airport. They bring passengers and employees. So how is it that we can kind of create a hub and spoke environment, just like aviation, for mass transit, where our autonomous vehicles are transporting the employees as opposed to that big bus that's belching carbon emissions into the environment, and we're moving into electric and autonomy.
Awesome. And so, Eddie, you touched on this a little bit earlier. Airport tarmacs, they're busy and complex environments with all of these different types of vehicles, and they're moving about, throughout the day and also at night, and of course, airplanes. So how does ThorDrive address this type of complex environment with its technology, and how critical is LiDAR as a component of that?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. It's really the only way we can really ascertain what's around us and what is it, how far is it, but then from that comes obviously how do I react to it. So all of those things we really can't, especially in this environment, with some technologies where they try to use redundant cameras and things like that. I'm sure you can get close, but you can't be exact. And in this environment, you really must be exact. The consequences of any of this is really, really large financially, but reputationally for us, this is a big part of the use of our technology. So we have to be very confident and sure of how we perceive the environment and how we react to it. And without Velodyne Lidar, that's just not possible.
And actually, this is a good spot for, I see an audience question about weather and snowy or rainy conditions. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's that's a tough one. So um, generally, we know from past experience that we can operate safely in a moderate amount of rain and snow. When it starts to get extreme, we start to get worried, and that just really at this time is kind of a physical limitation of the technology. I've actually had this conversation with several customers, and I work another great benefit of having Lidar Velodyne as a customer partner is access to their technical staff. And I know that there are some things going on there. There is some work going on with this, but we're still susceptible to heavily extreme weather. And I think we need to understand, because I think a lot of our customers, just based on what they hear, think that if there's very light precipitation, that their new technology that's saving them this money and so much safer has to sit. And that's not the case. It's only in those extreme conditions where you have large drops of rain, heavy snow, and in accumulation. And they're even to the extremes that in some of these cases, it might not even be safe for humans to be out there driving. So we also have to consider that.
And that's where the subject matter expertise comes in, right?
Exactly.
Not only ThorDrive, but also our partners at Velodyne, where under the circumstance, one of the elements that we shared with ThorDrive is, here's why we encourage you to come out to the Midwest and start working at CVG, because, oh, by the way, we have snow and ice conditions. So you're probably not going to experience that in the Valley. So perfect opportunity to really cut your teeth into a more challenging environment. And they have definitely done that. And again, credit to the retrofit type of approach under that circumstance. Again, if we were to purchase a bunch of purpose-built vehicles and we have a heavy snowfall event, that immediately grounds that entire fleet. Whereas at least we can start flipping it into manual mode. And to some degree, it's really kind of forcing the hand of the airlines and airports to determine exactly as Eddie just stated. Is it safe for humans to be driving itself? Or for driving the vehicle, or should we really kind of slow down the operation? And that's not uncommon. And we've all experienced that. If you've traveled through an airport during a heavy snow event, cancellations start occurring and operations start slowing. So there is an economic benefit of understanding that full ecosystem. And then I would only add to that, and credit to the individual that asked that question. So one of the elements that we have certainly been interested in researching is because of the heat capability, heat signaling, and the cold capability, we would love to start looking at the aircraft wing surfaces or the fuselage to determine how much, or does it actually need to be de-iced? And I know that's for those aviation individuals that might be listening in, I know that could be heresy. Right now in the current environment, it's really the pilot's decision to do that. But as you might understand, in the absence of information, typically what happens in today's environment, it's been happening for decades. If one pilot goes to de-ice, they all go to de-ice. They don't want to be that pilot that didn't make the right decision. So imagine all of the amounts of fluid that are expended just because one individual wanted to be overly conservative and the aircraft didn't necessarily need it. So we very much want to try to collect that data and put it right into the hands of the crew members that shows them, is the aircraft truly cold soaked, and do you have accumulate elements on the aircraft surfaces that really need to be addressed? And oh, by the way, we'll also share that with the de-icing organization or the de-icer, so they can put concentration on the particular parts of the aircraft and not just soak the entire thing. So the amount of efficiency that can be coming out of the technology, which again, all the more reason to start studying this. Yeah, there might be concerns about the cost of entry, but the cost of entry is relatively low in comparison to what it can produce in the future.
Great. And so I do have one more question specifically related to LiDAR, Eddie. So recently, Velodyne and ThorDrive announced a 5-year agreement around Velodyne's UltraPuck sensor. Eddie, why is Velodyne your LiDAR of choice?
Well, there's several reasons. Velodyne was the first mover. They've really had the most time to develop the technology. But there's other considerations, as ThorDrive really ramps up and we quickly go down the path of commercialization, we want a reliable partner that not only has a great product, but can make it reliably and begin to ramp up in volumes as we all know you guys are very quickly. So, it was not just the quality of the LiDAR itself, it's also, we need a reliable partner, because if we don't have access to LiDARs, we can't make product. And that for us is going to be a big problem. So that kind of did funnel down the appropriate choices. And we're familiar with many different LiDAR out on the market, but we always find that not only the product that we're using, but the products that we have access to trial, like Alpha Prime, we found to be amazing, and the amount of detail we can get with that. So and then, you know, like I mentioned before, the access to the technical team, really being able to have kind of that third very deep technical partner is a big advantage for us, and we've been able to pull on that several times. So all of those things, and just being able to you know, get answers quickly. I have to give a shout out to Jeremy Bryan. He's our account manager, and there's been many times where I've sent him a late note, or I just have an off the wall question, and you know, the answers come back quickly.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna pivot here a little bit. Brian, CVG, some people might not realize, is I believe the largest employer in Northern Kentucky. So what would you say to anyone who might be listening today and wondering if autonomous technology could eliminate potential job opportunities for people? What would you say to that?
No, we've been very quick to say it's not intended to eliminate jobs whatsoever. In fact, going into COVID, we were seeing a labor shortfall. So very much our interest is, frankly, closing that gap. When we're the largest employer in Northern Kentucky, and really what that implies is we have 15,000 badge holders that carry a CVG badge. That doesn't include the number of ancillary companies like the bus company that are supporting services inside to our campus. That number, that 15,000 number, is expected to climb well over 20,000 when Amazon is finished with their facilities and DHL is talking about expansion. So all good things. Airport's on fire in a very good way. In fact, you know, the whole e-commerce element has really attracted more companies to this particular region, because now ears are perking up saying, well, wait a minute, my company builds a widget, and if I'm hearing that I can move to that area and I can get it international via DHL, or I can get it domestic via Amazon, if I sell my product on Amazon, then that's a win-win for me. And coincidentally, we're only about an hour north of UPS in Louisville, and a few more hours to the south of us is Memphis with FedEx. So it's no coincidence that the major cargo carriers are in a perfect diagonal, almost in the midsection of the country. So from that perspective, we go back to the concern of, if we have employment gaps, how do we not position our tenants in such a bad situation where there's not enough employees to fill the jobs? So what can we start doing as far as leveraging robotics and autonomy to really create a stopgap? So I think it's going to be a long darn time before we start seeing robotics actually replacing jobs in this ecosystem.
And so, and for either one of you, I'm curious, you know, for an airport specifically, can you talk about, with this type of technology, are there regulations within the airport that you have to deal with, or, you know, do you work with local government on that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Great question. So yeah, we initially approached all above board. We went to our state transportation cabinet and really had that detailed discussion on what is the Commonwealth of Kentucky's plan for adopting autonomous vehicles. And frankly, there was a little bit of admonishment first, and then there was the pivot to, well, we're actually just going to wait to see what other states do to adopt the technology, and then we'll be kind of a follower at that point. In our opinion, again, talking about that employment concern and really rapid growth and technology adoption, and if we're trying to further the region's benefits, we absolutely kind of put our hand up and said, okay, well, that's not necessarily an answer that we were hoping to get. So we would encourage you to actually participate with us, because we're moving ahead. And the only reason that we're permitted to move ahead is that an airport like us has the, no pun intended, autonomy to use our service roads and the connected roads under our authority. So immediately we adopted basically an airport rule that said, we absolutely concur with robotics and autonomy. We absolutely want to encourage them to work here. just let the airport know, and we'll work with that organization to make sure that it's compliant to our expectations. And then, of course, we're not cutting out the state. We're not trying to cut out the DOT. It's more about let's learn and try to socialize this concept instead of being on the back end of adoption.
Great. So I do have one more question, then I'm going to move to audience Q&A because we have quite a few questions from our audience. So last question for me, for Eddie, the work you're doing with CVG has brought ThorDrive interest from other airports, not only here in the US, but in other parts of the world. Can you talk a little bit about how ThorDrive plans to expand its presence within the aviation industry and the interest from other airports?
Yeah, so that's been pretty amazing. We've gotten calls from Qatar, from Dubai, and based on really what we're doing here and the word getting out, as well as what our team in Korea has been doing, and a lot of the more specialty like indoor passenger carts that they've done. But our vision and the way that we see ourselves growing is certainly into other airports, but generally through airlines and ground handling operators, which are our potential customers. And that's one of the great things about being in this industry, is that kind of like what Brian was saying, is CVG's in charge of their area. And for me to really get our technology into operations, it's really a very known path for us. We have to get the concurrence of the airline, generally the ground handling operator, if there is one in the airport. And we're quickly going down that path with operational trial that we were just approved for earlier this week. So we're quickly going from just R&D to quickly down into commercialization with this operational trial.
Great. So I'm gonna move on to some of the audience questions right now. So I think this one's for Eddie. What kind of software support infrastructure is required to enable the LiDAR retrofitted vehicle fleet? And is there capability for retrospective historical data analysis today?
Wow. I'm definitely not the person to answer that question. I can definitely, I have, it's easy to find me. You're more than welcome to get in touch with me. I'd rather have someone on my technical team answer that. What I can say is that because we are a full stack developer, we do all of our development in-house, all of our software modules, our perception engine, localization engine and such, all of that is done in-house. So we aren't dependent on any other companies to participate in or further our development.
Great. I do have one other question about software that I'm going to pose. Will the software be airport specific or self-learning software which needs to be trained with huge data?
We continually add sophistication to this. So there will be some unique setup, as in for now, we do need to go in and make a map. But we continually add sophistication. But other than really the map and some of the bits of localization, the software is really very, very applicable to any environment. Because a ground support tractor is a tractor, or another vehicle out there, a plane is a plane, and so are wing walkers. So those types of things are very consistent. Really, the upfront work is just the upfront map.
And I would echo that. That's one of the reasons why we selected ThorDrive, is that it is capable of being taken into different platforms, and also consistent with research that we've done with other autonomous capabilities. I would say quickly for the novice, one of the elements that we learned and understood pretty implicitly is that you can't just buy an autonomous vehicle and set it and forget it. You absolutely have to do a mapping process first to really just make sure that everything is copacetic and that it's going to meet the needs. So I think there's a fair amount of non-educated public out there that just assumes that autonomous vehicles are ready, set, go, and that's not necessarily the case. But the implication, and I think another question out there, is like, what level is ThorDrive operating at? The beauty is it's really level 5, Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, right now we're at 4. Like I said, we do have the entire airport map, so we now have the capability to go anywhere. But right now we are doing level 4 with safety driver when we're in the terminal, And then we also have a test area outside of the terminal where we do no safety driver, complete level 4 operations. So we are capable of both. And of course, the end goal is to not have a safety driver. And with our operational trial that's coming up, as well as other customers that we're talking to, we very much have a well agreed to kind of crawl, walk, run, where everyone agrees, let's get to where we want to for the efficiency. But, you know, still, let's also make sure that everybody's comfortable and we're doing the right thing. So there's always going to be a bit of prove out, and that's fine. We expect it. But to now have the opportunity to get into those and then implement into actual operations is a great step for us.
Yeah, that's why I was asking for your confirmation on that, because really it's the nuance is it's self-limiting. The capability absolutely is there, and it's actually further along than what the DOT has approved. So from that perspective, again, that's why we're trying to leverage the airport space and allowing ThorDrive to really convince us and let us be comfortable that level 4 top and level 5 is ready to go.
So I have a question, Brian, in regards to retrofitting affecting warranty of something like the tractor.
Yeah, and Eddie, correct me if I'm wrong, but really it's going to go back to the original manufacturer, of course, and really level setting and having an understanding. Totally new to the environment. What we have seen so far is that there's interest naturally. But it really is that the original frame developer and manufacturer coming to the table and saying, okay, well, I'm interested in partnering as well, knowing that I'm going to have to get into this environment. What are the implications to me? And we see that quite a bit. I would go so far as to say we've encouraged insurance companies to come on board and take a look at what's going on, because at some point they're going to have to figure out, like, if there is an accident, who's at fault? Is it the autonomous vehicle, or is it the passenger or the driver from the other vehicle? So perfect learning opportunity or environment. There is no one set answer, unfortunately, but it's that crawl, walk, run that Eddie was just speaking to about bringing manufacturing to the table and starting to hammer out some of these broader implications.
Now, for Eddie, I have a question about ThorDrive. Is it still operating in Korea?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. The team is very active in Korea and growing very quickly. So they've just won some great new projects. They delivered an indoor autonomous passenger car to the Incheon Airport just last October. So they're very, very active and doing very well.
Awesome. And I have a question for either one of you. Are you looking at using this technology for security at the airport?
Hell to the yes. So quietly, we know the capabilities, and why I say quietly is that we don't want to oversell the product. Again, it's the research type of approach that we're taking of, okay, if we understand that it can do the mapping, then it's obviously looking for elements. So in Eddie's case, of course, we would be looking for is there an individual that's actually walking around that doesn't have a yellow vest on, or if we can determine, do they have a badge to some degree? And I've not discussed this with Eddie, so Eddie, don't panic. You start talking about potentially facial recognition. We're not fans of facial recognition, but certainly there are other forms of biometrics that can be captured by camera. Very interested in from that perspective of, is there somebody running on the ramp? If they're running, what's the implication there? They're probably not an employee. So we need to determine what those elements are and how do we start via automation, basically alerting different elements to either one, have that autonomous vehicle follow that individual within safety boundaries, and then number two, alert authorities of interdict and prevent the incident. On the inside of the environment, our robotics, actually, we're working with those companies to say, yeah, we want to see the unattended bag. And we also want to see, by the way, if we see a heat trace on a wall that typically isn't there. So if there's a heat trace there, it could imply that there's a mechanical problem behind that wall that could lead to fire or other emergencies. So again, a tremendous amount of capability that's just built into this LiDAR capability.
And I do want to mention, because you mentioned facial recognition, that's one of the advantages of LiDAR is you have that accuracy, but you don't make out people's facial features and expressions, so you don't give up that privacy. And we do have several more questions, but we don't have much time, so I'm going to ask one final question. And you kind of touched on this just now, Brian. Can the technology run indoors as well as outdoors?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and that's one of the factors of our software and our software development that we've developed along the way that we find is very important to a lot of customers. Sometimes, and there's a lot of situations where it's one way or the other. But we've, and partially due to our development at the airport, we know that there's use cases where we have to go indoor to outdoor, and we can do so seamlessly.
And coincidentally, if I can add real fast, I noticed one of the questions also was very aviation specific. So I'm going to presume this individual is familiar with the pilot requirements. So yeah, under that circumstance, heavy fog, the detection, ironically, just spoke to another organization retrofitting a Robinson 44, which is a very popular helicopter. They've already demonstrated with the LiDAR technology that basically that aircraft is able to take off in heavy fog conditions, get to a clear area, and that's where a pilot can take over, a normal human pilot. So what a crazy world we're starting to live into, that we're talking about a normal human pilot. Amazing technology.
Great. Awesome. So unfortunately, we're out of time. If we didn't get to your question, that's not a problem, because you have all of our contact information right there on your screen. So you can reach out directly to any of us with questions about ThorDrive's full stack autonomous solutions or CVG's use of autonomous technology at the airport. And of course, you can reach out with questions about any of Velodyne's LiDAR sensors. I want to remind everybody this webinar recording will be available to view on Velodyne's YouTube channel. I want to thank both Eddie and Brian again for joining us today. Thank you guys so much. It was a lot of fun.
Had a great time. Thanks.
Thanks. And I want to thank our audience for watching today as well. If you're interested in learning more about all of the latest developments and applications in the mobility industry, please be sure to join us on June 4th, when we'll be talking to Kat Dransfield, Vice President of Product and Digital Platform Strategy at Local Motors. Kat will be talking to us about building next generation vehicles at Local Motors Microfactory in Knoxville, Tennessee, and about global deployment of Ollie 2.0, the autonomous shuttle powered by Velodyne's LiDAR sensors. So we hope to see you then. Thanks so much for joining us today.